Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I wanted to share with you some of the decks that I'm considering rehoming. Now, because I have quite a few decks that I keep in what I lovingly call my Purgatory box, I'm going to be breaking this video into two parts. So in this first video, we'll be taking a look at some of the decks that I've really enjoyed working with over the years, but I've discovered that there are other decks in my collection that perhaps fill that space better for me. So before we jump into the decks, a quick disclaimer. We are going to be taking a look at some decks that are no longer working for me, but it is important to note that this is in no way meant to be disrespectful to the deck, the creator, the publisher, or anyone who has any connection to the deck. Each of these decks are valuable in their own unique way, but in full transparency, I will be honest about my experiences working with them. So let's go ahead and get started with our first deck here, which is actually this deck in the middle, which is in this little bag that I made, and it is the Tarot of a Hidden Realm. So this is the deck that's actually in my Purgatory box because of these two decks. So let's just take a quick peek at the Tarot of a Hidden Realm. I'm sure you have seen this deck before. It is not new. I probably should have put a nudity disclaimer at the beginning of this video because many of these decks do have nudity. This is a wonderful deck. I really love how up close and personal these characters are. This definitely feels like a deck that inhabits the Fae realm for me. And oh my goodness, like look at this image. This is beautiful. I really, really do enjoy this deck. It's absolutely stunning. Look at this Queen of Pentacles. I mean, she's amazing. This Five of Swords. I mean, this is an amazing card. This is an amazing depiction of the Five of Swords. We have the Blasted Beach for the Tower. This Hermit, oh my goodness. Like I could do this with every single card, right? It's beautiful, it's beautiful. So you might be wondering, why is it in my Purgatory box? Because clearly I enjoy the artwork. And actually the guidebook is beautiful. Oh, look at that Six of Cups. But here's the thing. Here's why it's in the Purgatory box. Because I don't actually work with Fae energy as a typical part of my practice. So Fae energy for me is a little bit tricky. I haven't quite figured out how to navigate that area, and it's not really a part of my practice it's not really a part of my practice. That's what I mean to say. And I have trouble getting around that fact when I'm working with this deck. I definitely feel like I'm in that realm, and like it's a beautiful, beautiful world, but this is not a world that I am comfortable being in, if that makes any sense. But then I got this deck, which is the Purgatory Tarot, or Purgatory, however it is that you say it. And this is an independently produced deck, whereas this is mass market. So there is a difference there, but we are going to look at a mass market deck here in a moment as well. This deck also inhabits the Fae realm, right? And for me, these Fae creatures I can connect with a little bit easier. I think part of it is they aren't so perfect, right? And I feel like I can see myself and connect better to these Fae creatures or Fae people or Fae energies, because they're not perfect. And I feel like that's a little bit like these are really perfect, almost unobtainable beings to me in the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. Whereas these feel like Fae people or energetic beings that are not perfect. And there's beauty in that imperfection, and I can connect with that quite a bit more. There's also a lot more going on in the cards in terms of this kind of art. And I just feel like as far as inhabiting a Fae world, this is more in the realm of what I am comfortable with. It feels a bit more organic, a bit more messy, and I do really, really like the interpretations in this deck, and it reads really well for me, but I find it also reads very elementally and very numerologically, which is more in line with how I read. Art styles are completely different. The imagery in the Hidden Realms is absolutely gorgeous. Like these are you could hang these on your wall, right? I mean, not that you couldn't but these feel more accessible. They feel more organic, and I feel more like I can connect with these beings in this particular deck than I can with the Tarot of the Hidden Realm, because these people feel so otherworldly that I can't really find a common space with them. And as beautiful as the Tarot of the Hidden Realm is, again, I just find that it's hard for me to connect with the characters in this particular deck. And if I were keeping a deck simply for aesthetics, and I was just looking at keeping only absolutely stunning works of art in my collection, I would be going for Tarot of the Hidden Realm, because while I do really like the Forhaxa, it's not the most beautiful deck I own. I think it is very pretty and it's very enchanting and I do enjoy it. But in comparison, like the artwork in the Tarot of the Hidden Realm is stunning. But I'm not looking at aesthetics. I'm looking at what actually works for me and what do I actually use. So if I am looking at working with a Fae deck, I am finding myself going to the Forhaxa every time, because this is a deck and a world that I feel like I can connect to, and a deck that represents more of how I work with the tarot, which is really, really the key point. And you're gonna see that theme reflected many, many times throughout this video. So similar to that, we have the Hush Tarot, which is another deck that for me very much inhabits that kind of Fae, otherworldly energy. And this deck, to be perfectly honest with you, took me a long time to connect with, because it doesn't always line up. The images and the tarot associations don't always line up for me. I have found my way around it. I have found my way of working with this deck. To me, this is a beautiful deck of life and death. It shows the beauty of the decay, which is absolutely necessary to find that rebirth, to grow. You have to have decay in order for there to be growth. And this deck illustrates that beautifully. And I really appreciate it for that. And it does something different than any of my other decks do. So while this is also very much a Fae deck, it definitely feels like it inhabits that Fae realm. It does so in a different way than my other Fae deck does, where this deck feels like a deck of death and decay in a sense. The Forhaxa feels like a death of life and rebirth. And so they balance each other quite well in terms of having that kind of elemental or Fae energy in my collection, whereas the Tarot of the Hidden Realm, again, feels more in that Rider-Waite-Smith space. But both very beautiful decks. Of course, you can see both very different aesthetically speaking. Actually, both are created by stunning artists. Both of these decks have glorious artwork to them, and I really enjoy it. So the Tarot of the Hidden Realm is in the Purgatory box, because if I want a deck that inhabits the Fae realm, I'm going to go to the Hush Tarot if I want that kind of death and decay energy, or the Forhaxa if I want that kind of life and rebirth. The Forhaxa really aligns a bit more with the way that I read tarot, as in very numerologically and elementally. The Hush Tarot offers me something different because it does focus more on the decay and less on the kind of rebirth and transformation. It's kind of the nitty gritty dirty stuff you got to do before you can get to the growth and the rebirth. And I don't have a lot of decks that offer that in my collection. So I feel like these two offer me something different and unique, but they still offer me the Fae energy that I would get in the Tarot of a Hidden Realm. And as beautiful as this deck is, I just really don't have a deep connection with it. And I feel a little bit like these beings are just a little too otherworldly, that I can't really connect with them, which is really interesting because they are very up close and personal, and you think that that would help. But I think that because I don't work with Fae energy in a broad sense in my practice, it doesn't really resonate with me. So as beautiful as this deck is, I think it might be time for it to leave my collection, because I have these two decks that I prefer to work with instead. So next we have what I consider my Rebecca Campbell decks. Now I know that the artwork is by Danielle Noel, and I have talked about how much I enjoy her artwork, how much I respect her as an artist, and I really do like her decks and I like her artwork. But here's the thing with these decks that I have found. Mine are all mixed together, so I will have to resort them. But the messages in the guidebooks and the messages on the cards are obviously by Rebecca Campbell. These are Rebecca Campbell decks that feature Danielle Noel artwork. And I've just found after time, I don't really like her writing. I'm just gonna be honest. I have read a couple of her books. I don't really care for them. I have trouble letting go of this card though, I'll be perfectly honest with you. But I can't keep a deck just for one card. That's like the one card that I'm like, oh, I'd be so sad to see it go. But obviously, these is a mix of these two decks. The purple ones are the Starseed Oracle, and the white ones are the Work Your Light. When it comes to, so I don't really care for the messages, right? And here's the thing that I was thinking about when I was looking at these two decks. I haven't really pulled this deck out. This is the combined one that I went through and there's a whole video on it. I pulled out all the cards that I didn't like from both decks or I felt were repeating energies, and I just pulled out the ones that I liked. And that's the ones that I put together and kept in one deck. And, you know, the more I've thought about this, the more I've thought about, look at all these I didn't like. Like, this is, I guess it's fairly even. I mean, it's fairly even, but that means about half of each of these decks I don't like. I haven't counted to see which is which. Or in some cases, it's not that I didn't like it, it's that I didn't care for the message, or I thought that felt that the energy was already reflected in another card that I had set aside in this pile. But these are cards that never get used because these are the cards that I don't resonate with. So I pulled them out of the deck, right? And so I got to thinking about, why do I even have these decks? What do I use them for? I do kind of dig the Lightworker vibe and energy to an extent, right? I think it can go a little overboard and I'm not fond of that, but I do kind of resonate on some level with the whole Lightworker Starseed thing. That is why I have so many of Danielle Noel's decks. And so I kept thinking I wanted to like these, but I don't really like Rebecca Campbell's approach to those things. So being as these two are Rebecca Campbell decks that just happen to feature Danielle Noel artwork, and which really made this clear to me was when the new Rebecca Campbell deck came out, some rose one, and it's got a totally different artist on it. So these are her decks. And here's the thing that I realized. I don't really resonate with the way that she approaches these topics. And I realized that I do have some other decks, and this is a fairly new one in my collection, that I do resonate more with the idea of how the deck approaches the Lightworker aspect. And this is just one. I do have a couple of other decks that have this kind of Lightworker energy to them, but I just pulled this one out because this is the newest one that I've been working with. Obviously, it's the Lightworker Oracle by Alana Fairchild, and I do really enjoy the guidebook, and her approach to light work is really what I'm looking at. Whereas Rebecca Campbell's approach to light work doesn't really resonate with me. So if I want a deck that is focusing on light work, I'm going to go for this one because this one more resonates with the way that I see that particular energy and the way that I work with it. Now, if I want a deck that features Danielle Noel artwork, I have two of her decks, the Moonchild and the Starchild. So if I want a deck that features her artwork, I can just use one of these. And I'm sure we've all seen these decks. Not my most favorite cardstock in the world, but anyway, if I want to tap into Danielle Noel's artwork, I can use one of her tarot decks. And I actually really like the way she approaches the tarot most of the time. So I actually enjoy her guidebooks, and I enjoy her write-ups, and I enjoy her approach. So that all works for me in a grand sense, right? There are some problematic cards in both of her decks, and some problematic things about both of her decks. But on the whole, I really do enjoy the way that she approaches the tarot in this case and the way that her artwork conveys that. So if I want a Danielle Noel deck, I just go for her actual decks rather than a deck created by somebody else featuring her artwork. Plus, I also purchased or pre-ordered her new Oracle deck, which is the Ocean Oracle, I think. And that is an Oracle deck by Danielle Noel featuring Danielle Noel artwork. So therefore, I feel like these two need to go because I already have decks that have her artwork. I have decks that fit the Lightworker bill for me. I feel like these are I'm just have them to have them at this point now, and I think it's time for them to go. The next deck I want to talk about is the Gaia Oracle, and this one is in the Purgatory box and has been for quite some time, to be perfectly honest. I think I used it about a month when I got it, and here's the thing with this deck and my issue with it is when I see Tony Carmine Salerno's artwork, it makes me think of the Tarot of the Light, which was formerly the Art of Love Tarot. So let me just pull that out for you. This is a deck that I have used for many, many years and I know these images pretty well. The associations are pretty well ingrained in my mind at this point, and you can see the artwork is really similar. Like there's a very distinct style, obviously because it's the same artist, right? There's a very distinct style to Tony Carmine Salerno artwork. And I have found, and I've had a lot of Tony's decks, but every time I get one, it makes me think of the Tarot of Light, and some of the images are really similar, if not repeating across this deck with the tarot and across other decks. So I have had other Tony decks and it has the same image repeated and they're used in different ways. There is one in particular, I'm pretty sure this one shows up in another oracle. I'm pretty sure this one does. This one, okay. So this one shows up in this deck as Perception Beyond the Veil of Illusion. And it is also in the Dragon Fae Oracle deck, which is a multi-artist collaboration. Now, every time I see this card, I think back to that Dragon Fae card. And I can't connect with it as Perception in this way. And here's the thing, I really like the artwork and I really like the imagery and I like the keywords, but I can't get past the cards that repeat across other oracle decks that feature this artist's work. I do have lots of other decks that kind of tap into this earthy kind of Gaia energy, and so the fact that this one kind of gives me pause whenever I pull a card and I'm like, oh, that looks like the Tarot of Light. I don't feel that I just don't want to work with it. Does that make sense? I don't know, that might not make any sense, but I think it's because I'm so connected to this deck and I'm so bonded with this deck. And because this artwork is so distinctive, there's no mistaking Tony Carmine Salerno artwork. I feel like that one is in here too, or there's something really similar. And that's kind of part of it, is like the oracle feels too similar. Like that feels really similar to that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it's almost the same picture. And while I can see, you know, ocean of love, ocean of eternal love, healing, creativity, and fertility, that can kind of relate to that moon energy, but it's just like, it's too similar. Let's just flip through some. I'm making a hot mess of my cards here, but let's just flip through some of them and see what we think. You guys, everything's just going everywhere. Okay. As you can tell, this is not a super prepared video. I don't know, they're just, it's like they're too similar on the table. And it's like these super similar images. And I kind of feel like we get the same 5 images over and over again. I mean, I don't mean that as like a criticism, but we have like the person close up like we see here. You know, we have trees, we have landscapes, there's a lot of naked women. Again, here's more trees. We got that angel energy going on. Again, naked women, which I'm not necessarily opposed to. It's just, it feels very samey, right? It feels like all the same. And that's not like, I don't mean that in a bad way, because it's by the same artist. So of course it feels the same. But I think because I'm so connected to the Tarot of Light and I've used it for so long, and I know it so well, that whenever I see one of Tony Carmine Salerno oracles, it just immediately takes me to this deck, and I'm like, I just want to work with this deck, right? Why am I bothering with the oracle at this point? I should just work with the tarot deck, because that's really what I want to be working with. And so again, it's nothing against the deck or the artist. It's just for me personally, like if I'm gonna work with a deck of Tony Carmine Salerno artwork, I want to work with the Tarot of Light. And that just is what it is. And I've already rehomed. I think I've bought at one point or another every Tony Carmine Salerno deck, oracle deck that I have found, and I have rehomed all but 2 of them, and both of them are in the Purgatory box. So that's kind of my bigger issue, besides the fact that like sometimes the cards repeat across decks, particularly with the oracles, and they have different messages, and I'm not fond of that. Like it just, I don't know, there's a disconnect there for me. But the biggest problem is that if I want to work with this artist's artwork, I want this deck. And because I also really love what Denise Jarvie did when in the guidebook. I think it's fantastic. Like that's the connection that I want to make. So that's where I'm at with this one. I think as much as I just keep trying to connect to the oracle decks featuring Tony's artwork, I just really, at the end of the day, I want my Tarot of Light, and I just need to just work with it. I don't need oracle decks that occupy the exact same space as my tarot, is what I'm trying to get at. I use them differently. And so I think for me, I think my Tony oracles I think they just need to go. Okay, so speaking of Tony Carmine Salerno oracle decks, we also have the Magdalen Oracle. Now, in all fairness, first of all, I was disappointed it was shiny, because a lot of the Blue Angel decks that I've been getting lately have been in that beautiful matte, and so it was kind of a turn off to get this one in glossy cardstock. But just as I was saying about the Gaia Oracle, I feel the exact same way about this deck. Like, I do like the theme of having a deck with the sort of energy of Mary Magdalene. I also hate when they do this with oracle cards. This does not work for me, and I pretty much rehome most decks that do that. This, again, repeating artwork. I've seen this artwork in other decks. There's a lot of Christian influence in this deck, which is fine. There's a Gaia card in this deck. There was in the other one. I do love that there's a Sophia card. Again, trees. And it's got really nice keywords, to be perfectly honest. Like I do like the keywords. But here's the thing. Again, why do they do that? Don't do that. Just don't use that card, or just don't use that image. Again, similar of the same that I was just talking about with the Gaia Oracle, with it being Tony Carmine Salerno artwork. Like if I see this artwork, I just want my Tarot of Light. The other thing with this particular deck is I have the Mary Magdalene Sisterhood of the Rose power cards, which honestly, the title is a bit much. I'll just be honest. But this is an amazing deck. And what's so funny is I really don't like the artwork in this deck. Like, for the most part, I really, really don't. I'm gonna be honest, it's kind of, it's photoshopped collage-y in not in a way that really resonates with how I like to see my collage decks. I really don't like the border thing going on. It's a hodgepodge of different people and things, and like here we have, you know, Isis references with empowerment. Love that keyword. This is not a depiction of Isis. That, I mean, that bothers me. the art style is all over the place. Here's very modern images with very sort of medieval, and then we have this really new agey stuff, and then we have some kind of Christian connotation things and some Native American, and like, it's kind of a hot mess, you guys. I'll be perfectly honest, like from a design standpoint, it's a hot mess. And that sounds really mean. I should probably edit that out, but I'm not going to. But the thing is, it reads really well. Like, I'm not even joking. It reads really well for a deck of tapping into Mary Magdalene energy. This, even with this little bitty guidebook, is so much more on point and powerful than the Tony Carmine Salerno deck is. So, I mean, if you're just looking for aesthetics, go with this one. It's beautiful. You can probably get it in the matte now, which is even wonderful. This deck is, the cardstock is fine. I mean, it's not anything special. It's very shuffleable, which is nice. It's gilded and that cheap gilding stuff, which I don't like. I don't like the backs. Like, this is a deck that I don't like anything about it in terms of its aesthetics, but it reads so well for me, and I really like the messages that I get from this deck and the interpretations in the guidebook. This to me feels like a legitimate Mary Magdalene deck, where this to me feels like a deck where they just took cards or artwork that could relate to Mary Magdalene and pulled it together, because that's a thing people are doing right now, right? Kind of working with Magdalene energy and learning about Mary Magdalene is very popular right now. And so this to me, I'm going to be honest, feels like a cash grab, whereas this, I feel like it was created to actually honor the energy and the messages and the teachings of Mary Magdalene. So when it comes to a Magdalen Oracle, this is the one I go for every time, because it feels authentic, where this feels like it's just a compilation of images and keywords that loosely relate to the teachings of Mary Magdalene. And again, this is just me being perfectly honest. I'm not trying to diss this deck. It is beautiful. The artwork is beautiful. And I think that if you're just wanting to kind of gently pull in that energy, this is a wonderful choice. But if you want to get into the nitty-gritty and you really want to work with the energy of Mary Magdalene, this deck all the way. So yeah, again, this one I think just needs to go because it's not my preferred Magdalen Oracle. The only reason I've really hung on to it is because the artwork is so much prettier in this deck. But at the end of the day, pretty artwork doesn't matter. What I need is a deck that I can read with and that I can work with. And that's the Mary Magdalene Sisterhood of the Rose Power Cards. They should really rethink that title. Okay, speaking of Marys, are you ready for this one? Because this is the Mysteries of Mary Tarot, and yes, it is in my Purgatory box. So I have some issues with this deck. I'm gonna be honest. I hate the cardstock and it's really hard to work with. It's super slippy, it's too big, and I can't easily shuffle it. The artwork is beautiful, and I'm not trying to diss this creator or this artwork, because these were all created like by hand as actual pieces of I forget what they call those, dioramas. They're actual pieces of art that have been probably photographed and then created into this deck, which is beautiful. The guidebook is stunningly written. It has some really wonderful stories and messages in it about Mary and some different, biblical stories and references and things like that. My issue with this deck is that it's very difficult for me to work with in a general sense. So it was fine when I was just pulling it for one card to get a message from Mary. Although I had to reference the guidebook. There was absolutely no way for me to work with this deck without the guidebook, because they're, even the tarot associations, because everything's been changed, I have to look up what everything is, because I don't ever remember. outside of maybe vessels. That one I know, right? But I don't know these stories well enough to just pick this deck up and work with it and read with it that way. I always have to rely on the guidebook. And in that way, it feels like it only functions as a sort of prayer or meditation or single card devotional deck. And I have other decks that I can do that with that also work in other ways in my collection. So I kind of feel like this is one of those instances where the deck is just kind of, it does one thing, and I have other decks that do that one thing too, as well as other things, if that makes sense. It's beautiful, but I just don't, it's not a deck that I can just pick up and read with. I absolutely love this card. And again, do I want to keep a deck because I absolutely love one card? Also, I wanted to get the creator's other decks because I thought that would be really neat. But between the cost of the deck and shipping, they're over $200, and that to me just that feels a little much for an indie deck. I'll just be perfectly honest, because if you have all three, that's $600, and I'm just going to be perfectly honest, that's not in my tarot budget. So I'm like, I did get this one. They were cheaper back when I bought it, because I want to say I paid like $85 for this, which is honestly getting up at the top of my indie deck price. But $200 for a deck is out of my budget, and so that means that I can't get the other two. I can't get the Black Madonna that's already out, or the Mary Magdalene one that's in the works. But again, I mean, I really thought about it, particularly when the Black Madonna came out. But I can only work with this deck in one way, and that is to pull a card, read the book, and kind of, spend some time with the message, which is all well and good. But I can also do that with any of my other Mary decks that I have. Now, these two are the same, so that's going to be kind of a side Purgatory thing as well. But I'm going to be perfectly honest. I know Doreen Virtue. It's a thing, right? But a beautiful friend sent me this deck because it's been on my wish list forever, and like it's kind of like the Sisterhood of the Rose deck we just looked at. Like, aesthetically speaking, it's not like my favorite. Like, this is beautiful, right? In comparison, this is just somebody took old works of art and added the messages and the meanings from Doreen Virtue, right? This is not, I mean, once upon a time it was original works of art, for sure, right? It's still original works of art, but they weren't created for the tarot, these were. And so in that kind of comparison, it's kind of like apples and oranges. But underneath all of that, these are both Mary decks. These are both decks that I can use to help me tap into working with Mother Mary. And this deck, because it has keywords and titles and whatnot, I can connect with it better. And granted, we're also comparing tarot to oracle, which is not a fair comparison. I get that. But when I work with deity, the deck that I use to connect to deity is rarely a tarot deck. The main connection point for me is usually an oracle, because I find that works better in how I work with deity. And I am lumping Mary in with deity here because that's very much how I interact with that, with her energy. I don't use tarot. I use tarot as a supplement to expand upon the message. And that is really hard to do with this deck because of the way the deck is written. Every card is a story in itself. So it kind of needs to be the focal point. If you start, layering in 6 of these cards into a big reading, it gets very confusing very fast. So when I'm looking at the decks that I work with and connecting with Mary, this is how more I interact with Mary. And I do really enjoy this one. I know it's a Doreen Virtue deck, but whatever. I mean, she's got issues, but who doesn't? So I still like the deck, and I'm so happy to have it. The other deck that also does this same thing for me is the Mother Mary Oracle. And this is just the full-size edition, so we'll just pull out this pocket one, which I absolutely love. This artwork, to be perfectly honest, resonates with me more. This is beautiful. Please don't get me wrong, it's beautiful. But this artwork resonates with me much more than this does. And again, this feels more like a deck that I can work with to interact with and commune with and connect with Mother Mary. I can use this as a focal point, and if I need additional information, I can pull tarot around it. Although I do find that most of the time that this works just fine for me. Whereas again, I have a hard time doing that with this particular deck. I could also pull multiple cards from this deck too, right? So I can do, this is not a great example because the messages are all in the back, but I could do a 3-card reading with this deck and get my messages, right? Our Lady of the Abundant Garden, Our Lady of Holy Fire, and Our Lady of the Rose Crown. And there's a little bit about these. This is manageable. This deck is not manageable for me. Again, this is all just my personal opinion, right? It's not manageable for me. And so because I can only use it one way, I think it really does probably need to go. It's not a deck that I have pulled out in quite some time, many, many months, because I have other Mary decks that work better for me. And that's really what we're talking about today. This type of oracle deck or this type of oracle deck works better for me to connect with and commune with and have devotional time with Mother Mary. This to me feels more like a deck that was great for study and getting to know the stories, but I feel like I've done that. I've done a deep dive. I've gone through all the cards. I've used it for daily pulls and all of that, and I feel like I've kind of hit the wall with this deck. And now I can't really use it as a tarot. It doesn't function well as a tarot for me, but it also doesn't function well as an oracle because there's no succinct message that I can really pull away from it. So that's where I'm sitting with the Mysteries of Mary. It's in the Purgatory box because I'm not 100% sure it's gonna go, because it is beautiful. I do love it. I did do a lot of work with it, but I'm really finding that it's really kind of lost its place in my collection because I don't use it as a tarot and it doesn't work very well as an oracle for me. So again, I've been using my Doreen Virtue one or my Alana Fairchild Mother Mary, and I'll be perfectly honest, I've been using this one more than any. So just real quick, we're gonna do another deck that's in the Purgatory box, and that's just the full-size edition of the Mother Mary Oracle. This is the glossy one, and to be perfectly honest, this is matte, and I have heard that you can get this in the matte version now, and that is a consideration. I have thought about purchasing that one. But I'm just not sure I need 2 of these, which is funny because I do have 2 of the Isis oracles because I have the large edition for altar cards and the pocket edition for readings. And I may do the same with this. However, I don't find that I use these as altar cards, which is interesting. And that's probably because my work with Mary is done in the evenings most of the time nowadays. So it's a before bed thing. And for that, this works much better because I'm doing, first of all, readings on my bed. So I don't really have like an altar space to just pop up a card. These are easier for me to shuffle and work with in that way. And so while like the case with the Isis Oracle where I have both, because I have one as altar cards and one as actual reading cards, I don't display these anywhere. So I don't know that I need a bigger edition. And I mean, the guidebook is fine, but because I have a very specific practice for Mother Mary, I don't actually use the guidebook with this deck. Although I have found that I do like quite a few of Alana Fairchild's guidebooks. I'm really enjoying the Lightworker one at the moment, but again, I'm just not sure I need both because I don't do anything with these. This is what lives in my bedroom, and these are the ones that I work with all the time. So I'm not sure I need to actually keep those. So that's where I'm sitting with these. I'm with my Mary decks. I'm thinking the Mysteries of Mary is time for it to go, as well as the larger edition of the Mother Mary Oracle, because these are the 2 main decks that I use when I work with Mother Mary. So getting into our last few decks, these are the ones that I think are really the ones that I am kind of struggling the most with in terms of do I want to rehome this deck? And this one is the Weaver's Oracle. Really similar to how I just talked about the Mysteries of Mary, I have a really hard time working with this deck in any way other than just pulling a card, sitting with it, reading the stories. and then letting it hang out with me. I have done that. I have worked my way through all of the cards, and I feel like I got to know them. I read their stories, and now I don't know what to do with them. I don't find that I can't use it as a traditional oracle because there are no keywords. I have to get into the guidebook and kind of mine through the writings there to find kind of like that takeaway message. When I'm working with oracle, most of the time I'm looking for a kind of quicker message. You know, while this is super beautiful, if I get storm, weathered woman of the dark drum, just on its own, I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do with that. I got to go into the guidebook, and so as an oracle, it doesn't function well for me. And I may be the only one, because I know everybody loves this deck, but again, like the Mysteries of Mary, I feel like it's a deck that I can only use to pull out, to do you know, deep meditation work and all of that with. But I've done that, and I feel like I've experienced these weavers. I've experienced their story and their messages, and I feel like we're done, if that makes sense. And I've not pulled it out since, is the thing, right? I've not pulled it out since, and it's been a really long time since I've had this deck out and worked with it, because I felt like I did the work, and now I'm done with it. So the thing is that when we're talking about decks that I have that work better for me, I have the Lantern Oracle, which I think has, to be perfectly honest, artwork that is just as beautiful. And I think it has messages that are just as deep. This is also mass market, and this is an indie deck, so there's definitely that in terms of if you're looking at like this or that. This is, of course, much more accessible and easier to get. I have also purchased this creator's books, which I really like. And so I think for me, that's also the case of that. I prefer the books. This to me is a case where it's better as a book than a deck. It functions better for me. This energy functions better for me as a book than a deck. Whereas in the case with the Lantern Oracle, this functions better for me as a deck. I can use it in the exact same way that I use the Weaver's Oracle, and that I can pull one card. I can read the story. I can sit with it. I can you know, meditate with it. I can deep dive into it. I can connect with it, spend time with it. I can do all the same things that I can do with the Weaver Oracle, but I can also use it in tarot readings. I used it as a way to connect with the Deviant Moon to try and understand and unlock that deck, which was beautiful. I use this deck quite frequently around the Dark Moon. It's also a deck that I just love to pull out for connecting with that kind of ancestor crone energy. I think it works beautifully for that. I love that card. And again, it's just a much more versatile oracle deck for me. And I'm finding that because my spiritual practices that I incorporate cards into is very specific. I have very specific decks and very specific needs for that. And so when I'm looking at like something like the Weaver's Oracle, it doesn't really fit anywhere in my practice currently. And the question is always, if I rehome it, will I regret it? While it is still available, it is an expensive deck to purchase. It's an expensive deck to ship here from overseas because I'm in the States. And will I regret it? I don't know. The other thing, the other big difference between these two decks is these feel like almost otherworldly beings. Like, I don't know, there's a separateness to this deck that I feel a gap between me and these figures, and I have trouble traversing that gap. Whereas these images and these figures, I feel like very much inhabit the world in which I live, and so I can connect with them. I mean, like, I feel like that could be my grandparents, right? You know, this could be my family. This could be my friend. This could be me. This could be, you know, me in the future. It's just, I feel like these connect more personally connect more for me on a deeper level. And I can in a sense communicate better with the images on this deck. They communicate easier with me. I have an easier time understanding them. Whereas these figures feel otherworldly and removed. And so I have trouble connecting with them on a personal level. And again, it's probably just a me thing, but the whole point of this is to really talk through the decks that I'm thinking about rehoming and why, and to kind of hopefully find some clarity there, and to also just share the experience with you. But yeah, I'm just not sure that, again, I think I like this creator's books better than the Oracle deck. The Oracle deck, I mean, it's beautiful artwork. That's not what I mean. I just mean it doesn't function well as an Oracle for me. And I think this is an instance where I enjoy the books more, which I do have. So the next deck is one that I honestly go back and forth with. It ends up in and out of my Purgatory bin all the time. This is the Witch's Wisdom Oracle. No, Tarot, Witch's Wisdom Tarot. This deck is stunning. It really, really is. And I really enjoy the, numerological and elemental aspect of the cards. But I think I've talked about this before. The majors, it throws me every time. And I've done some deep work with this deck. I love the chords. I love the way they're renamed. Yeah, I don't know, you guys. Like, the artwork is so beautiful and I love it, but I'm trying to pull out some of the majors. I should have thought about that. I mean, look at that Four of Water with the humpback whales. I mean, that's like everything. Okay, so there's a couple of them, right? And I have, there's another one. There's another one. All right. So I've done a deep dive. I've done my whole card by card in-depth study. I've made videos on this deck. I've made member videos on this deck. I want so badly to be able to work with this deck, but the major arcana, because of the numbers, throws me every freaking time. This is 18, which is Guardian, which I think relates to the Emperor. 17 is Wisdom Keeper, which I think relates to the Hierophant. Now, if you just take that off, take the numbers off, and you're like, that's the Hierophant and that's the Emperor, I'm on board with that. I love it. And the fact that it goes backwards, like in terms of the story, like we start out in the world on fire, and then we come around to the world as an integrated whole, which I didn't pull that card out, but I get that. It works for me. Like the change in the reversing of the order doesn't really bother me. Like this is judgment or awakening, right? This is it's called initiation. Even that works. It's the stupid numbers on the cards. I will tell you that right now. And I don't mean stupid as in dig at the deck. I mean stupid because me. Like why do the numbers bother me so bad? 16. That is the Lover's card. Again, that's an awesome Lover's card. I love it. And I'm just like, do I just need to white it out? Do I need to just chop off the bottom? Because I've really, really thought about that. Just taking the titles off all the cards and maybe numbering them in my own way, because like, I so love this artwork, but every time I use this deck, every single time I use this deck and I get one of these major arcanas with the different number on them, it pulls me right out of the reading. And I'm just like 7, Ancestor. Beautiful, but I see 7, I think Chariot. 9, Rebirth. I see 9, I think Hermit, not Rebirth. It's just, like there's the Fool, the Pilgrim. I get that, right? It's a beautiful Fool card. Why does my brain insist on getting caught up in the numbers? Like, this is a very me problem, but this is my video and my deck and my collection, and that's what we're talking about, my issues, right? Like, these are so cool. Like, I love them. I really, really do. Oh, here's the World. The Council of All Beings, which is awesome. Here's Strength. Again, if you take that number off, I love that for a Strength card. So my brain will not let me disconnect the numbers from the cards. And I wonder if that's because I do read very numerologically, so the numbers matter. And I am going to do a whole video on how I read tarot. It's actually going to be several videos, probably a series, because the numbers in the major arcana for me correspond to the numbers in the minor arcana. And that is how I read them. They are all connected in a very numerological and elemental way for me. And because this deck has renumbered them, that throws my whole system off in a sense, right? And I think that's probably what it is. I mean, it's in the Purgatory box, but at this point, because it's a mass market deck, I'm half tempted to just chop the titles off and give it a try and just write the numbers on the deck in the way that works for me. So I mean, like this strength card, like I'm totally on board with this image for strength, but if you put the number 14 on there, because of the way I read, I immediately go temperance. And then I go down the line of my correspondences that I work with when I read the tarot. And when you throw that 14 in there, that does not relate to strength. And so, yeah. I mean, it's a very me problem, right? It's nothing personal against this deck. I do have to say, I hate the card stock. It is big and bulky, and I cannot shuffle this deck. Like, yep, just can't even, not even remotely. Like, if I want to riffle shuffle it, which is my preferred shuffling method, I have to half it. And again, it's that cardboardy, like same as the Dream Keepers that I hate, but it's bigger, which is awful. And I can't even, because it's so big, I cannot easily overhand it. Like, it's a real chore to work with. So like production wise, I cannot stand the production of this deck. But the artwork is so pretty, you guys. It's so pretty. Like, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit. Like, I really want to, but I just can't with the numbers being wrong, because, not wrong, I don't mean wrong, backwards, because of the way I read tarot, because I read numbers, the numbers numerologically, and that ties in so profoundly to the way that I work with the tarot. When it's numbered differently, it really throws me off. I can do the strength and justice reversal because I've definitely have had to come around to working with that. But this is all the major arcana cards, right? It's not like just making one or two small adjustments to the way I read tarot. This is asking me to adjust the way I read tarot in a very impactful way, and I just can't do it. And every time one of these major arcana cards comes up, it ruins the whole reading for me because of the damn number. I'll just be perfectly honest. So I probably just need to chop them off and see what happens, right? Maybe that's where I'm at. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. Although why it's also in Purgatory box is because like it's a witchy deck, and I'm like, even though this is totally different witchy, totally different. Like, please don't send me hate messages, because I get these are totally different things. They were created in totally different eras. But when I want a sort of really earthy witchy deck, I have my Green Witch Tarot, and I know this deck has its issues. Find me a deck that doesn't have issues, because I don't think it exists out there. Depending on who you ask, right? But I'm so connected to this deck. I'm so bonded with it. I know it so well. It's been there for me for so long that I kind of feel like, do I really need to put the time and the effort into trying to modify this deck to make it work for me when I do already have a, you know, witchy, kind of pagan-y, earthy green deck that already works perfectly well for me? So that's where I'm at. And I honestly don't have any better decision yet than I did, other than at this point I'm kind of leaning towards just trying to cut those titles off. But again, I keep circling back around to, should I try to modify this deck just to make it work for me when this one already does? And like, this one works on so many levels, right? It works in the imagery and the structure and all that, and it works because I know it so well, but it also works like physically. Like, the size is right, the cardstock is good, like it's thin and flexible and shuffleable. I do not like thick cards. Like, this is, to me, that's perfect. I can easily shuffle it, I can easily work with it. So yeah, That's where I'm at with the Witch's Wisdom, which is a little bit even more heartbreaking because Phyllis Carrot books were very influential when I was first exploring witchcraft many years ago, and I still to this day have 2 of her books that I bought way back when, which have survived many moves and many calls, which is kind of amazing that they're still here, but they are. And so I really wanted to have this be like my witchy deck because it really does kind of take me back to that time when I had, you know, was first learning about witchcraft and Wicca and was, you know, reading her books. You know, I can still love her books and not be able to really work with the deck. The guidebook for the deck is great too. But again, I keep circling back to do I need to do all of that when this already works for me? Okay, we are down to the last deck in this section, which is why I am breaking this up into 2 videos because I have more decks to talk about in my Purgatory box. But the last one for this one is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot. I know. Here's the thing with this deck. This was a FOMO deck for me. I'm just gonna be perfectly honest. Everybody had this deck. Everybody was talking about this deck. And so I thought, oh my goodness, I need this deck too. Because everybody loves it. I don't like this deck. I'm just like, there are aspects about this deck that I do like. I do kind of enjoy its cheeky nature, although me and this deck don't always get along, and I think it knows I don't like it very well. It does have some really cool things going on in here. Like, it really does. But this is one of those decks that, like, I felt like I should like it. Like there's something wrong with you because you don't like this deck. Like, you know, when you're having those little conversations with yourself, and like every freaking October I pull out this deck and I'm like, okay, we're gonna do it. We're gonna work together this season, and we're gonna like each other, and we're gonna get along, and it's gonna work. It does have my favorite world card, and that's, again, we're back to, do I keep a deck because I love one card? No, that's just silly. Anyway, every year with this deck, every year I'm like, I pull it out and I'm like, I'm supposed to like you. Everybody likes you. That's Robert Downey Jr., right? I mean, it just is. I feel like it is. Anyway, I don't like this deck, you guys. I'm sorry. I know. I just don't. It doesn't resonate with me. It's a deck that I've been trying to force myself to work with for years now because everybody else loves it and everybody else works with it, and people who don't have it are like, oh my goodness, I would love to have that deck. And I'm sitting over here with it going, why do I have to work with you again? Like, it's October, and that means it's time to pull out the Bohemian Gothic, and here we go again. That is legitimately how I feel when I pull this deck out. Like, here we go again. Let's try again. It's like the bad date that you just keep repeating over and over again because you feel like this person should be right for you, and no matter how many times you try, they're just not, but you just keep doing it because you feel like you should, right? That is my relationship with the Bohemian Gothic. I have lots of feels about it, right? And here's the thing. So looking at decks that I have that I like more, when October rolls around, and this was really key for me when I was like, do I want to keep this deck, right? And this is currently, I think, an out of print deck, and it's Baba Studios, and like it's a whole thing, right? It's a whole thing with them. When October rolls around and I'm looking at my decks that I'm gonna pull out for the spooky season, I get super excited to pull out my zombie tarot. So again, this is the zombie tarot. It has the cardstock that I hate, that is that cardboardy US games, can't really riffle shuffle it. I don't even freaking care. This deck is cheeky. It makes me laugh. I get great readings with it. I love the interpretations. And when October rolls around, I get super excited to get this deck out. Like, I kind of save it as like a special occasion that I only use during the spooky seasons because like it feels fun and special, and I really enjoy working with it. And so if I want a cheeky deck that I really am excited to work with every October, this is the deck I go for. And it happens every year. Since I've gotten both of these decks, it happens every year. I pull this one out and go, it's October, it's time to try this again. And then I pull the Zombie Tarot out and I'm like, yes, it's October. We get to come out and play together again. And I'm so excited about it. So why? Why would I keep this? Let's talk about a couple other decks that I have that, like this deck, I have so many other decks that resonate more for me. If I'm looking for a deck that has that spooky vibe with that collage imagery, what's the deal here? Oh, that's the title card. Then I've got my Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's. I freaking love this deck. And this is collage, it's creepy, it's weird, it's dark, it's kind of in that same Renaissance-y world that the Bohemian Gothic occupies. And I much prefer this deck. Again, like the Zombie Tarot, this is a deck that I get super excited to get out and work with in the fall. And I'm like, yes, I can't wait. It's like the summer when I get really excited to work with my mermaid deck, right? I get real excited and I'm like, yes, I can't wait to work with Madame Lydia again. And I'm so excited to do readings and to tap into this energy. And yeah, like I'm super excited to work with this one too. And it gives me that, you know, whereas the zombie kind of gives me that cheeky, fun, playful energy. The Madame Lydia's gives me that dark, creepy, collagey, almost kind of monster-y vibe, right? And I like that better. And then if I want the vampires, because Bohemian Gothic is primarily vampires, or there's a lot of vampires in it anyway, I have now, which is still in order because I have not actually started working with it, but I have the Vampire Tarot, the Ian Daniel one, which I'm real excited to work with because this is 90s vampires, which is kind of my jam, man, kind of my jam. I was a teenager in the 90s. I was super into vampire stuff and, you know, I don't know, wanted to be a vampire. Who knows? I was like, that was the thing and I was all into it. Plus, look at the gradients. Like, that's just so cool. I love that. Anyway, so if I want vampires, I have this. So, and this deck is, again, mass market, easy to get a hold of. The Zombie Tarot is mass market, easy to get a hold of. Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's is about as easy to get a hold of as the Bohemian Gothic. So they, in that sense, they occupy the same space. They are both indie decks. Madame Lydia's, I think, it doesn't go out of print. I don't think it's really so much like a Baba Studio where they just do a run and whatever. Like the creator has had health issues. So anyway, there we have it. That's the end. I have 3 decks that I love more than the Bohemian Gothic. And it's just, you know, it's a deck I feel like I should love, but I just don't. And so there you have it. Again, that is the first part of my Purgatory box. The decks that I'm calling It's Not You, It's Me. These are decks that I generally do enjoy, but I have other decks in my collection that kind of fit that space better or work better for me or feel like I can connect with better. So that was a look at some of the decks that I'm considering rehoming. If I do decide that it's time for them to go, I'll be listing them in my shop on my website, and you can find a link for that in the description box below, as well as links for where you can purchase these decks new if they're still in print. As always, my friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.